Have you been losing money? Perhaps you placed some bets and thought the Jets would go on a run after Hellebuck came back. They've been on a run, all right. Perhaps you thought Markstrom was due for a shutout. Maybe you thought the Washington Generals would finally beat the Globetrotters.
I thought the Generals were due!
Rockstar Realtor!
Welcome back to Rockstar Realtor. I know it seems like it's perpetually Christmas here. Christmas is a good time to record videos. When things slow down, we take a little time to ourselves. We get a little time with the family. We watch a little YouTube. You're watching me on YouTube right now. Now, the funny thing about being a realtor is that obviously we like looking at houses. Many of us in our spare time. That's probably a reason a lot of us got into the industry, was because we liked looking at houses. It would be a pretty strange industry to get into if you didn't like looking at houses. When you're looking at houses a lot, obviously your algorithm thinks that you're shopping for houses. And then you start getting advertisements from other realtors. There is one that comes up a lot, and this isn't limited to one realtor. This is a very old and stereotypical advertising method, and it's the idea that if you go with another realtor, that you will lose money on your transaction. This is a scary thing to hear. We have put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into our homes. We've worked really hard to save up down payments. We've eschewed other things that we might like vacations or new cars or whatever, to ensure that we can make mortgage payments and put a roof over our heads. And it's scary to think that all that work that we've put into it can disappear overnight because of a bad transaction. To put those fears to rest, I want to explore how likely it is that you would actually lose a sizable sum on your transaction. The Canadian Real Estate Association, the Alberta Real Estate Association, their education and their consistent licensing ensures that they are competent and consistent at doing things like home evaluations. So, when you list your home and you're working with a competent realtor, that price for your specific home type should be consistent based on the market that you're in. Now, what we're going to do today is we're going to take a look at a little bit of a case study. This is the kind of information and case study that I would do with my McEwen students when I'm teaching sessionally at McEwen in property management in the business program. Typically, in that program, we're looking at real estate as an investment. When you think about your primary residence, you're thinking about something you exchange money for, almost like any other household good. And the fact of the matter is that your home, unlike money that you exchange for a car, a television, appliances, even groceries, typically doesn't depreciate the way that these other consumer items would. A home, even a primary residence, any real estate is an investment. And when we're talking about losing money, what we should be thinking about is losing value on that investment, or not getting the return on investment, or the ROI, that perhaps we should. So we're going to dive into this case study. We're going to take a look at, and in an average situation, would you actually lose money on a transaction? The easiest home to use in this example was my house. I am only the second owner of it. It was purchased in 2015. It was built in 2008. So the history between then and 2026, I have a pretty good idea of. A little bit of information on the house. It was built in 2008. I purchased it in 2015. It's a fairly average home. It is an 1,800 square foot, 2-story, which is very common for the time, with a bonus room that I'm sitting in now. Some upgrades like hardwood floors, larger windows, out basement. Some of the things that will affect value is that we're in Spruce Grove and housing prices tend to be a little bit less here than in the heart of Edmonton. So when we use the comparison of this house's value to the Edmonton CMA as a whole, yes, the Edmonton CMA figures average in Spruce Grove, but Spruce Grove itself is a little bit more inexpensive. Some other variables that we're taking a look at as a house ages and certain things need to be replaced, that house may not be as valuable as when it was first built, after cats and kids have destroyed the carpet, after, for example, we have a walkout and now they're building things behind us. So that's definitely going to affect the value. So we have to start somewhere, and a good place to start is by looking at the value of the home over time. Here's the non-adjusted price, and I'll tell you what I mean by adjusted in the second when we go to the next chart. It was built for $475,000 in 2008. In 2014, the original owners listed it for $445,000. They didn't get that amount. We ended up paying $426,000 for it in 2015. The tax assessments I was getting from the time after were not great, let's just say. The market took a dip during this time, and if you remember, if you were buying a house during this time, although interest rates were low, housing prices were also low. COVID was one of the big factors in that. So you can see that the valuation of this house went down to around 389,000. Then in 2022, I was thinking about putting the house on the market. It assessed it at about 440,000. By 2024, when I was now a realtor, obviously one of the things we like to do is think about what the value of our own house is relative to the rest of the houses around us. And I put the house at about 490,000. And then this last year I had to refinance my mortgage, and that put the house at about 520,000. If you're looking at the trend line here, it looks like generally since 2008 the house has increased in value. Is that true though? We tend to forget inflation a bit. And when it comes up in a movie, watching James Bond and somebody demands a sum of like $10 million, wow, $10 million in the 60s, that would be like $100 million today, right? It's very obvious that there is that difference in value from that time to this time. When we talk about in a span of like maybe 20 or less years, we tend to not think about how the consumer price index affects us as much in a shorter term. Now, when you have market shocks like COVID, inflation can affect you a great deal, even over 3 years. Now, if you don't know what the consumer price index is, it is essentially the way that governments determine what the value of a dollar buys so that we can mark what the value of a dollar is at such and such time versus another time. Index uses a fixed basket of goods that are common retail items that we purchase. A lot of groceries are on there, gasoline and other things like that. So let's take a look at what this house was actually worth in 2025 dollars so that I can see if I actually gained a return on investment or not. You can see that adjusted for 2025 dollars, the home value was actually built for $685,000 equivalent today. And I find this really interesting. This house is fairly average aside from the walkout basement, a little bit more expensive than I think it should have been. Now, it's important to stop here because we are concerned about showing the situations in which you could possibly lose value. One of the most common situations where you could lose value and lose return on investment in selling your home is when you build and you have to sell your house in the short term. Houses that are built typically in 5 years after they're built don't retain their value compared to what a builder sells them for. I've even heard builders that increase their price between $15,000 and $25,000 quarterly, no matter what the market does. So Housing prices on houses that are built, especially related to if there's high demand and buyers don't have another option, might not reflect what the market is doing. And we can see that in the first couple of years after this house was built, the house could not sell for what it was built for. And in fact, it's not even a couple of years. If you look at the trend line on this graph, my house is still not doesn't have the value that it was built for. So now we have a rough idea of what the value of our house is, and it looks like it went down, but that's still not enough to say that we're definitely going to lose money or value in a transaction. The value of your home only makes sense compared to what the value is of other homes in that market segment, or perhaps the market segment that you're going to. There are only a few situations in which somebody might actually sell a home and then exit the market entirely. If the value of your home has decreased and you're leaving the market entirely, maybe you're moving out of the city, out of the area, out of province entirely. Maybe you're moving to a different country where the housing market is completely different and it's not apples to apples. Then you're really worried about what that sort of standalone value is. But if you're moving houses in the same market, which is the majority of consumers, this value only matters in the context of the market that you're selling it in. The average detached value in Edmonton over the last 5 years or so. Now, this does include Spruce Grove. It also includes Stony Plain, Sherwood Park, St. Albert. Keep in mind that this is going to be a little bit higher than what it is strictly in Spruce Grove where my house exists. As long as the house follows these market trends, we're in good shape. In 2021, we were at about 474,000 and the market generally continued to climb. There was a little bit of a dip in 2023. If you remember, we had higher interest rates come into effect in 2023. And then you can see in 2024 where they start slashing interest rates into 2025, which really heated up the market and people started to get back into the market again. You can see that generally the trend line for this is that the market has increased over the last 5 years. But these figures are dollar figures from that year, and we have to adjust relative to the CPI to see what inflation has done to the actual dollar values. So here is our next graph with the adjusted price overlaid, and you can see that that dip that happens in 2023 when interest rates get higher is actually much more pronounced. Now, the trend line is generally upward sloping, but it's a little bit flatter than we thought. It was actually a little higher in 2024 than it is this year. Some people have been talking about the market cooling off a little bit at the end of this year. This might be indicative of that. So now we know what the market is doing. We know what our house is worth. What is our house actually worth compared to the market that it's in? If we look at our adjusted value versus the adjusted market average, we can see that our house generally stays fairly close to what the market value is. When that dip happened in 2023, geez, that looked like it would have been a good time to sell because the adjusted price of our house got a little closer to what the market price was. And if I had sold this house and bought a house that was a little bit more average value or what the average house was selling for at that time, then look at how it takes off compared to what my house does. And, in the end, my house remains relatively close to what the market average is. Finally, let's look at the non-adjusted value versus the non-adjusted market average. And you can see that the price of my house in the last 5 years is always pretty close to the market average price. So that basically means if I had a competent realtor come in and evaluate my house compared to the market that it was in, I would have basically been on track and not really lost a massive amount of money or value at any time. These ads are meant to frighten you into obviously choosing a specific realtor to work with. Really, any realtor that is worth their weight in salt would be able to price your house according to what the market is and help you avoid losing that amount. This gives you a little bit more information for when you're going to sell your house. If you're thinking it's a good time or a bad time to sell, let me know. I would be happy to take a look at what your house's value is compared to what the value of the market is doing and tell you if it's closer to the market or if it's a little bit farther away. Maybe you need to wait. Maybe now is the time, like it was in 2023. This was a fairly easy exercise to do, and I've hoped that I've taught you enough that perhaps you can do this exercise on your own. If not, let me know. I would love to help you out with it. If you or anyone you know would like to buy or sell a house in the Edmonton area, don't hesitate to reach out to me here at the information on the screen.